Okay, as we move into the summer and autumn turn in 1813, new reinforcements have been placed. The Brits just got one big old unit up here in Quebec, but the Americans get a whole pile of units due to come in at Albany. Cleverly, there's actually a route traveling there, the Hudson, I assume. And that's, well, like I said, they get to show up there and fight, but I looked at the rules on this, and if the enemy occupies the reinforcement space, there's going to be a battle there. Now, this doesn't happen until the U.S. player's turn, and in fact, the statement is that if you play a strategy card during that, the player can still use a strategy card to move other units in the map. But there's sort of an implication that the attack happens before that happens. It's not absolute. Very vague, very limited there. There's the question, well, can I bring them in and bring Dearborn over at the same time and do a combined attack? Looking at the campaign cards, they don't allow that kind of coordination between forces. So I'm going to say no, you can't. And in fact, this attack has to happen first. If it fails, these forces are destroyed. If they're forced to retreat, they are destroyed from the game. But they may soften things up enough that Dearborn can launch an attack. Anyway, that's how I'm going to play it out. And the Brits, well, we'll see what they do. You know, I'm looking at the situation from last turn where Proctor was able to retreat into Sandwich. He was only able to do that because Harrison actually moved out of supply. In order to make up for that, I'm going to find some unit for Harrison to leave at Sandwich. He had plenty of force. And force Proctor to retreat to a naval, to a different, by sea. Which he would have been able to do, I think, with what he has. Let's make sure, because he'd lose some Tecumseh can't get out of there. So his forces are going to be wiped out, the Indians. But yeah, that was a mistake. I'll clean that up and come back. Actually, by my reading, Proctor's force is destroyed. The retreat by water requires that the boats have been sitting in Fort Malden. He was defeated. He was pushed against the shore. These ships are out patrolling, skirting around, doing stuff. They're not available to get him out of there. As far as I can read the retreat rules, you have to actually have the boats in the space with you to retreat. Which will bring a possible replacement, I'm checking. But yeah, this entire force is wiped out. Well, an exciting series of actions that didn't go terribly well for the Brits. They opened up with Brock marching down, and he defeats Rensselaer and drives him back, but with no losses. Now, if he gets one more victory, he pushes Rensselaer off the map, destroys his army, and bang, he's won. The problem is, he's got to leave something behind here, and his strength is getting lower and lower. He was already going into this at poor odds. He played the thin red line to get himself a +2. Well, that wasted his good card for the military. And then when, Hampton shows up here at Albany, Hampton manages, after a battle that skewed against him, to actually win. There was a pretty good chance that Hampton was going to be forced to retreat, but a series of good die rolls, and eventually in 11 drives Prevost back to Saratoga. Then Dearborn activates and marches in. Now that was probably a mistake on Dearborn's part, although he has a huge stack here. Some of them are injured units, and it did not go well for him. He had not a terrible disadvantage, but he was at a -1. He was driven back immediately with losses. So now we're at this kind of stalemate. I don't think Prevost can take Albany, but he does have the numbers. And if he succeeds in taking Albany, well, he drives them back to Schenectady, and he's back in that same kind of position, except with the defensive bonus of Albany, where he was before, but without interdicting the troops from Albany, which is kind of not where he wants to be. Meanwhile, the U.S. also used a minor operations for theirs, which allowed them to build some more boats over here for Chauncey. They're preparing to make an attack on Ontario, on Lake Ontario. The Brits are really going to have to get some navies, and may worry about actually being present here, because they don't want to lose their fleet, but they also don't want to lose control of the lake. Uh-oh. Prevost managed to retake Albany. Bad odds, but he went in. Just a -1 on the die rolls, several rounds. He eventually got the victory. Drives Dearborn back to Schenectady. Now I thought, okay, no big deal. I'll start rebuilding my forces at Schenectady. The Brits can't do that. Nuh-uh. The Americans don't have a supply source. Their supply source is Albany, Pittsburgh, and then over here. They got problems. The only way they can reestablish supply is by winning Lake Erie, by driving the Brits off of there. The only way I think they can do that is to actually conquer all the ports on it, including Erie itself. Now, if they take Erie and trap Brock in there, they've got kind of a powerful situation. But how do they get Harrison all the way down there to fight Brock? Or can they bring Rensselaer up to fight him? Maybe that's their best option. But they've got to break the hold that the English have, because right now, until we connect Erie back in place, the Americans aren't in supply. And that means Prevost gets to sit in Albany as long as he likes. So Van Rensselaer started building up his forces. Now he marched up. Brock fell back. Kind of a questionable thing there. He had more troops at Erie, but I'm beginning to learn in this game, giving up territory is kind of dangerous. When you fall back on something that there's an advantage, it's probably worth it. But there's a chance, and this was a battle that was only slightly in favor of the Brits, there's a chance that they could be forced to retreat. And then what? They'd have to take hits retreating into enemy territory. In addition, they'd break this line, and Erie would then be open, perhaps. Of course, they would be either in Buffalo or Cleveland, in which case it didn't really matter. The supply line wasn't going to be fully open. But it is possible to get pushed out of a place you want to be. Perry, unfortunately, can't do anything with his fleets. He's much smaller than Barclay, and he just doesn't want to launch an attack there. That would help tremendously, because then supplies would flow from Buffalo across here. This army's got too long a walk to go. So Rensselaer seemed like the best option. It didn't work. The Brits started moving this big De Meuron unit down from Quebec with the hope of bolstering Brock with that, but that's probably not going to be sufficient. The Brits score a victory point card with the Shannon versus Chesapeake, and basically looking at, we're not going to get an automatic victory. We've lost the far west, and the Americans launch Van Rensselaer again. Again, at a failure. It's like a -2 to the die roll normally. He made a couple of attacks there. They didn't dislodge the Brits. It's just not working. Not sure what to do. I can't build ships in Buffalo, which would help the situation tremendously. It would fix it if I could launch a naval attack until next year, because I lost Erie, and that was my prime port on the front. Painful. Okay, well, everything's kind of frozen, but this is hell. So I've got to try to look, can I maybe cut the supply line that the Brits are using so we could fight at even odds, because our strength would be halved in both cases. I don't know. Well, a little bit of attention by the Brits showed that, yeah, the supply line could have been cut. These folks down here, the Vermont militia, could have gone 2, 4, 6 up to Saint Jean, and that would have actually entirely cut the British supply line. Some kind of minor campaign, some kind of campaign card or something could have allowed that to move up in an attack by Dearborn. So I moved that big old unit up into Saint Jean to try to protect that. Well, the Americans managed to get Dearborn back into supply by marching Harrison all the way up to Fort George. He's now got a link coming through here. Hey, you got to do what you got to do. That's going to still, most of his army is going to dissolve, is going to be reduced to half strength still. But at least he doesn't lose half of his army to just pure desertions. About the only thing you could do. And Harrison just chased, there was a single militia unit that got chased all the way there and then fought there. With the building of Fort York, that would have been a secondary place to go. Now that's open too, so there's some real risks here. The Americans have kind of gotten the London corridor under their control. Nobody held a winter card. I gotta check the numbers. I don't know if they're right here, but right now, according to this, I've got 18 for the Brits. That's kind of weird chart. I'll check those and see if we're right. And then I'll finish up the winter, see what the effects of that are. And I gotta say, both times I've played this, it's been very dramatic in terms of this hangs on kind of a knife's edge. It's just very easy to bring things to this tremendous breaking point. Okay, so that's the end of 1813. We move into 1814, and I've got some setup to do, etc. The numbers were right. It is at 18. It's a weird and risky situation across the board because we've got this loose cannon here with Harrison. There's nothing that can really stop him. I got Hull back here who could go and start to gather some of these. Problem with that, he can't. I need this chain. That chain's important, and Brock could go disrupt that, but if he disrupts it, he lets Rensselaer out. So I'm one army short with the Brits, right? I got Dearborn blocked up, I got Rensselaer blocked up, but I don't have anything to stop Harrison. Now, supposedly in 1814, I'm going to be getting a lot of reinforcements. They damn well better do something, because letting this break, that's not a good idea at all. Of course, Harrison has a little bit of problem, which is that he does have to maintain this supply line from the west, because I'm blocked from the eastern sides of things. Weird situation. Really interesting. All right, we'll load this one up.